that is grounded in the research, which is an example of a charter school that we've been working with that was paying attention to how much agency and relevance drives motivation, and started thinking about, would there be ways for young people to actually act as learning designers themselves with the care of a teacher and guidance, et cetera, in a way that, first of all, helps them master learning, literally, which is probably a skill they're going to need when they change their jobs 14 times in the next 20 years, but also take some of the work off of the plate of the teacher of being that learning design, the only learning designer. And so there's hope here. Okay, but as you said, perils. How did we get this wrong, right? I mean, there have been waves of technologies that haven't materialized and haven't held their promise and all the things. But let's stay here for a moment because we have to understand how we can get this wrong. What comes to mind when you think about the perils?
Well, just to put a finer point on our last thread, I think what I go to in my own mind very quickly is that access to information or even interaction with a trained bot, a highly trained bot, is not the same as learning and growth. That is not it. Those may be springboards by which we want to see some learning mechanism, some developmental mechanism, some kind of rapid burst occur. But I think we can't confuse the tools and the technologies with what we know is effectively a social enterprise. We have known for 100 years that learning is inherently social. It's the relationships, it's the interactions, it's the cognitive stimulation, it's the back and forth. So how actually do we bring the technology into the human loop to enhance that developmental process that is inherently social? With peers, adults and peers will always be the facilitators and the mediators. So how do we now think about our theory of action then?
Yeah. Building off of this idea that learning really is social, right? And certainly technology can help. My fear is, as a parent of a 10 and 7-year-old, having talked to other parents, smartphones and social media, there's been plenty of technologies before, right? We had the iPad revolution, we had computers, we had TV way back when. We sort of posited these as the solutions and the be-all, end-alls to what's going to advance learning. And yet, time and time again, let's talk about smartphones and social media, the research is not great on how we handled the introduction of those emerging technologies at the time into a student's learning both inside and outside of school. And so I think what we have to do is really mine for what have we learned about what are use cases that work to really give students access to this highly relevant and engaging curriculum alongside what they need to know around the possibilities of human potential and the work that they need to do with their educators and teachers to drive forward learning. I think we have a lot of lessons to learn, but we haven't yet shown or demonstrated we can bridge those things. Yeah. But the opportunity ahead of us is to learn those lessons and carry it forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think what we're seeing is a pattern that, to your point, Anish, we've seen before. Massive investment, rapid deployment and disruption, and then persistent inequities. Lots of patterns in our student outcomes that we worry a great deal about. And in this latest wave, with my developmentalist hat on from 2009 to the present, not only are we worried about the inequalities, the persistent inequalities, we are also clear there has been harm developmentally, right? We have adolescents whose brain development in that moment is geared much more towards risk and reward, while the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making and planning and execution, needs a lot of support and work. And so I see this as to your point, Elon, about the peril, I am certainly optimistic on the side of if we get our theories of change exactly right and we go into this understanding there are ways we could augment the learning environment and in fact make teachers' hard jobs easier, offload some things that give them more time for what matters most, then I think we are back into the promise. But to your point, I think we are at a real critical moment to not repeat that pattern that has been repeated for a couple of decades at least.
So good, such good reminders. I feel like we're grounding in some realities, starting with, as one of my board members, Boris Axberg, says, the hardware in here isn't changing. And so we have to ground in the science of learning, like that learning is social, that's not changing. And that we have these human tendencies to overextend and hope and all that stuff is also all at play. And so let's end here with, I mean, in this room we have classroom leaders, school leaders, system leaders, product makers, investors, funders. You know, if there's a group of people that can get this right, here they are, right? And so maybe let's end with a shared vision of what would it look like if we got it right? And then everyone's job here is to backwards map and say, what role do I play in that? And so it's 5 years from now. Anish, your prediction came true, and every 22-year-old is hankering to become a teacher because the job is so awesome. What is true in 5 years? What is that North Star that we might all collectively rally around? And then, of course, what would need to be true to make that happen?
I mean, I'll start and you should jump in. I think if we look 5 years ahead, we will have been successful if we had teachers, school leaders, educators working alongside technology companies and platform companies to co-create and co-design what is possible. I think we will see that students are able to access a type of individualized learning that is honestly just too hard for a teacher to do alone without the technology, but that the AI tools available to us will be engaging, they'll be relevant, they'll be rigorous, and it'll be exactly what students need, right? And we have some of these tools and technologies already. The technology is also evolving very quickly, so we don't know what'll be true in 5 years. What we know is it'll have a set of fundamental principles around teaching and learning that'll matter. And we'll see teachers working with students in ways that they are uniquely able to do, pursuing a set of learning outcomes that are different than maybe the learning outcomes we pursue today. I don't even think we have consensus yet. There are a lot of frameworks on what is the purpose of school and what is the purpose of learning, but we'll have more clarity and consensus around what are we learning for. And teachers will be able to guide students on that journey to motivate them to build relationships, to keep them engaged in their own journey so that the learning that we all want to be true, that meets students where they are, is fundamentally possible for them in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Double clicking on everything Anish just said, and then I'll put my hat on as Dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education and say that in 5 years too, I hope that our evidence base is much more robust and actionable. We at the Harvard Graduate School of Education are launching into this. We are already evaluating, for example, the rollout of Khan Academy at scale in the Philippines. We need to have researchers at the table as well. We have to come up with much more actionable, evidence-based guidance. We have had a vacuum in certain ways on ed tech. We've gone for scale and efficiency, and I don't think that we've paid nearly enough attention to what it is we're learning for the sake of both the learning principles and designs and what we can expect in terms of measurable outcomes. We together should be a field that can talk about, we can map tools and approaches and strategies to what we expect to see, therefore, in the learning environment and what we expect to measure at the level of the learner and their outcomes. So excited about that work too.
And I hope that in this world 5 years from now, we'll be able to point to whole learning environments that are showing what the future can look like. And if I can add one more dimension that I think will be important in 5 years, it's that we've accepted and built the infrastructure around the notion that it's going to keep changing, right? That we don't need to have a refresh moment every 10 years, but that the refresh is happening on the daily, right? Based on new information, based on new evidence coming from my own kids in my own classroom all the way to the kids in the Philippines, right? Like that we have some way of the shared decision making to help us evolve together in real time.
And what you hear in both of these comments too is that teachers are not the end users. That's not the idea, right? In this kind of a dynamic system, this is a really healthy ecosystem of learners, including the adults.
Ultimately, I think what we're getting at is AI is yet another tool, right? It's a technology. I remember when I started in the classroom, I went from a chalkboard and an overhead projector to a smartboard, right? And that was a big deal. We were all so excited. And so, yeah, it was a tool, right? It didn't fundamentally change what I had to teach my students. It didn't fundamentally change the rigor with which I had to show up, the relationships I had to build. And so I hope in 5 years, we really capture the opportunity to use it as a tool, but not as a replacement for what we know is uniquely human.
Yeah, and I've loved for the last couple days that lots of these conversations here are about centering the human in the technology. And I hear that, and I hear that as kind of novel at this moment.
Yes, yes, in this pivotal moment where we're at a crossroads and we could repeat our mistakes or we could really try to get it right. And many of the things that you brought up, I think, are pushing us in the right direction. Thank you so much for this rich conversation and for your expertise, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Up next, we're diving into one of the most urgent questions in education and workforce today. Can higher education, skills, and AI actually come together in a way that meets the realities of a changing economy? Joining us on stage, Byron August, CEO and co-founder of Opportunity at Work, and Ted Mitchell, president of the American Council of Education. I'll be joined by Jane Swift, president of Education at Work and former governor of Massachusetts. Her leadership has long bridged education, workforce, and public service. Please join me in welcoming Byron, Ted, and Jane.
Well, thank you. This is our annual version of What Will She Say? So when they invited me to be the moderator, I was like, well, everybody knows we'll do the prep session. I may or may not say what is on the briefing sheets, but it's fun to have those anyway. This is going to be fast, and I am thrilled to be here with two august, see what I did there, colleagues. But we are hoping to settle what is, I think, a fairly significant debate going on in the workforce area. As was said, I have been in policy areas, but today, as the CEO of Education at Work, I'm really working at the intersection of higher education and the workforce. I like to think of myself as a talent developer. It sounds very highfalutin. But what we are going to figure out is skills-based hiring, college. Are they mutually exclusive? Can they exist together? Or is it a fight to the death, a cage match, if you will? So the first thing I want to do is to introduce my two terrific panelists, Ted Mitchell, who comes at this from the higher education angle, representing the American College Council on Education. I guess you don't call yourself higher education. Why not?
Just wait, it's coming.
Okay. And also, and I practice this, Byron August, who is the, see, August, I use that, right? But that's not how you say his name.
That's very good.
So it's an august conversation, but our panelist is Mr. August, who is the co-founder of Opportunity at Work. And he has sparked, really, the skills first hiring movement and the Tear the Paper Ceiling campaign. So the media, my favorite group of people, have spent the year, I haven't lost that in 30 years of being out of politics, have spent years pitting the skills first hiring movement and the skills based hiring movement against college degrees. And so we're going to take 3 rounds to really get to the bottom of whether or not this is really a myth or fact. And so the first myth that we are going to look to tackle, and they told me that I should say let's go at the beginning of each round so my panelists would know. Is there anyone else here from Massachusetts? Please raise your hand. Do we actually say let's go in Massachusetts? No, we say LFG. That's a Tom Brady thing, but I don't think I'm allowed to say that here, so I'll just say LFG. But that's how you say let's go in Massachusetts for any of you who are going to visit. All right, so starting with the biggest myth. College is the only legitimate path to a skilled life. LFG, Mr. Mitchell. What do you think?
Of course.
Well, this will keep us moving quickly.
Comma. No, of course it's not. And I think that what's an even more interesting question is college at all a pathway to meaningful work? But that's round two.
Right. So, Mr. Tear the Paper Sealing campaign.
Well, we know that college is not the only path to professional success. We have 70 million Americans who don't have college degrees, but who are skilled through alternative routes, like mainly from work on the job, but also in military service and community colleges and and lots of programs that are kind of represented in this room. But above all, people are learners. And we have, on the one hand, we have 4 million stars in high-wage jobs, more than twice the median wage, with the two biggest job titles being CEO and software developer. But on the flip side, the barriers to stars have actually squeezed out 8 million stars from paths to upward mobility in the last 20 years. And we're sitting right now with 30 million people, stars, who have actually skills for jobs that pay about 50% more than the ones they're in. So there's a huge unlock still. So I don't think we can say that it's like a level playing field. And I think there's clearly lots of advantages to college, but we are already seeing lots of pathways to professional success.
Can I ask you, so I've been running a call center for Intuit TurboTax for the last 8 weeks, and so all of our college students who work there all use all these acronyms. I thought there was one I didn't understand because they kept putting RR in the chat, and I was finally like, because I have to ask my kids all the time, what do these things mean? RR means restroom. I didn't know what that meant. We're using the word stars.
Yeah.
Will you just, I'm not sure everybody uses
Sure.
that. Could you just spell out what STAR, how we're using that word?
So stars means skilled through alternative routes.
And I'm sure you all knew that and didn't mean me to clear that up, but in case we keep using that word star, and RR means restroom.
Yeah.
All right, keep going.
But the most important part of that is skilled.
Right.
It's like, what are you, not what are you not?
So college is not the only path to opportunity. I work with lots of college students. I will also tell you, I grew up in my path to college, was paid for by a wonderful plumbing company, and many of my cousins and uncles are still in a skilled trade. All of them worked very hard to send their children to college. What I see today with our students is that it's skills plus, skills and experience and a college degree that brings a lot of value if you find that opportunity in the right way. So if college is not the only path to opportunity, what is the solution for most young adults or most not so young adults? How do we find opportunity for more workers in this rapidly changing economy? Why don't we start this time?
Yeah,
This
well,
is still question one, by the way. We haven't even gotten to question two. You'll know when I say LFG.
So I think there's one thing about what does an individual do, and that depends on their circumstances and what opportunities are before them. But in terms of how the system should work, it is really critical to tear the paper ceiling, meaning not that college isn't valuable, not that a degree isn't valuable, not that there's something wrong with that paper, but that there's something wrong with using that paper as a ceiling to keep other people out, which is to say we need to have skills as the currency of upward mobility so that if you can do the job, you can get the job. That's number one. Second, we need to give people so many more ways to show what they can do, whether they're in college or not, whether that's projects and demonstrations and builds, whether that's work-based learning, whether that's apprenticeships. There's a lot of ways to do it. And finally, you have to have a way for valuable learning to actually lead to higher earnings wherever that learning took place. College, not college, et cetera. That's what we have to do.
So let me go back to my little teaser about whether college is the right path. How many of you are doing something with your life that is described on your business card the way it was described on your diploma? Not a lot. So I would argue this goes back to a fundamental problem that we have in higher education and have had for centuries, is that we teach a lot of skills, but we don't identify them, we don't label them, we don't assess them, and we don't name them. Higher education is a world of proxies. How many of you are history majors? Man. How many of you are economics majors? Okay, in either case, that label is a proxy for skills. And I think this isn't a cage match. Byron and I are good friends, and we think about this all the time. The problem in college is that we have not been good for our students in naming and assessing skills. So I think we've got to get better at tearing our own paper ceiling. We've got to get beyond that piece of paper that says economics and say what analytics, what communication, et cetera, et cetera. And so in a way, I'm hoping that higher education can follow the work that Byron and his colleagues are doing in coming up with nameable skills, a taxonomy of those skills, a variety of different ways in which they can be developed, and a variety of different ways in which they can be assessed. That's on us.
So I think we're all violently agreeing, which makes things really boring, which you don't want to provoke me into trying to make this more interesting. I just ain't going to warn you about that now. But if we're agreeing that this is a skills-based world and we need skills, and college is one of the ways, but not the only way you can do that, folks still think there are parts, maybe, of college. I think you were saying the diploma and how the transcript may be obsolete. Are there other parts in a skills-first world, right, where we know we have to recognize multiple ways of learning, where employers should put more emphasis on what students know? What I see, and the reason I'm doing the work I'm doing, what employers have basically done is added to the requirement for a degree years of experience. I'm trying to solve this riddle for this generation of every entry-level job requires 3 years of experience and nobody's hiring entry-level workers. So in my little mommy magic wand, I'm trying for thousands of students to figure out how to get you 3 years of experience without any entry-level jobs. It's no problem. These are the things that moms do. But with all of those things together, are there things at college that are obsolete or that need to be done completely differently? LFG, so you know it's the second question.
Sure. I think it's the absence of. So I want to move your question into credit for prior learning. So we assume when students come into college, especially 18 to 24-year-olds, which is a declining population and actually the minority of college students, but we still treat everybody who comes through the door as if they're starting at the same place. They're not. Some need a lot more work in some areas where their high schools might not have been great, but even more come to college with a boatload of experience that we need to identify, experience and skills that we need to identify and give them credit for. We've been doing this for military for 40 years. Imagine an Army medic, got a GED, goes into the Army, comes out of the Army as after 2 tours of duty. I want to be a nurse. Well, do they have to start at the beginning of human anatomy, biology? They sure shouldn't. And so we were able to provide college credit for that military experience that puts them on a different pathway. That's a way of, in part, building up a student's sense of self, sense of worth, giving credit to the work that they've done and the people they're becoming.
Gina, I think that there's a lot that college can do better and needs to, and there's a real temptation for college. I mean, no faculty senate ever voted for college to be the only path to the middle class. That's not a thing that college said, that university said. In a sense, the degree has been weaponized by the way it's being used in employment. And it's not, but at the same time, colleges and universities are incredibly important institutions that should take their role in learning more seriously and should actually reject their role in sort of bifurcating our society into some sort of feudal society where some people are talent, some people are labor, and other people are surplus to requirement. That's BS, and we've got to break it. And college has to be part of solving it, even if college didn't invent that problem. So I think if you look at the math, Just like you can't write off like what everyone's learning on the job and like half the skilled workforce that are skilled through alternative routes. You can't write off the incredible capacity and capability, just the incredible gift we have of this higher education system. And college can be, should be much more a bridge to opportunity for millions of people, but we can't make it a drawbridge that pulls up behind and leaves everybody else on the outside.
You know, one of the things you said, so is I'm trying to like solve this, how do you find work for students when there's less work for entry level? I think the skills first, as opposed to the label, may work in solving this work-based learning where we don't have enough internships, but we have plenty of jobs.
But isn't that what that 5 years of experience is really asking? It's another
Yes.
kind of proxy.
Right, what do you have for skills? But also most students going into college think that they have to get those skills through an internship. We don't have enough internships, but what we've been trying to think through is we have all these empty jobs, which is a lot of what we do. How do we take the jobs that are empty and make those the same equivalent of internships, which I think you're saying, how do we take prior learning and make that the same equivalent to you achieve the same competency and the same skill level as you would in this course.
Yeah, and even if somebody doesn't use that college credit,
Right.
I really care, the same drawbridge sense that Byron raised, I really care that if people later in life choose to go to college, that they're able to translate what they have been doing into the currency of the realm, into the college credit. That's right.
So we've solved the whole what are we going to do about college system. So now let's solve the other one about what happens when AI makes entry-level jobs obsolete. This is 3, which is a good thing because we're almost out of time. And I'm not going to opine on this because I have so much to say based on the work we've done this year into it with AI. But doesn't AI, Ted, make the college degree more relevant? Don't we need students who can think critically and problem solve? And if so, how does that work with the reimagining we just talked about?
As long as higher education pursues the development of those skills. And I think that for many students who are in sort of anonymous lecture halls and very big places, who regurgitate what they learn in order to pass the exam, I think we need to up our game and say, in the AI world, how can we change every college experience to focus on those critical thinking, those communications, those imagination skills that we're counting on differentiating humans from machines.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just think one thing is we have to recognize you can gain those skills in lots of ways. And Ted, I agree with you in the way that colleges should make those skills more central to the college experience, but you can learn those skills as a roofing contractor. You can learn those skills as an insurance agent. I mean, you can learn those skills in a lot of different ways. And remember that like things are changing so quickly. It's not just about people coming out of school, whether that's high school or college. It's all the people that are already in the labor market. And so I think the focus needs to be not just on the college to career transitions, but to career transitions in general. And Opportunity at Work and the Brookings Institution just released a pretty comprehensive look at the impact of AI on economic mobility. And I think the conclusions from that are, first of all, you have to look at how people move through the labor market. So when you think about like a call center representative, well, it's very troubling, like how many of those jobs might be eliminated. But the blast radius is actually much larger because it's all the people who would have moved into that job and then all the ways they would have moved out into sales jobs, other jobs. And so it's both the employer pipeline and sort of people's opportunity. Take that across 70 gateway jobs plus the college to career transition, you've got a big challenge. On the other hand, some of these destination jobs that were relatively close in skills to call center workers, they too can be augmented by AI, and maybe we can shrink the skills distance so that actually, if we're losing half of our call center jobs, maybe those workers aren't unemployed, they can move into these other areas. But this is something we have to do on purpose. We have to make it a design problem. AI is it's a general purpose technology that yields so much to our purpose. I think AI is like amplified intention. What are we trying to do with it? And I believe that if we're pouring trillions of dollars of capital into it, we have to start solving new problems, and we have to solve it with new problem solvers. We have to put these tools of problem solving into the hands of people with the contextual knowledge of the unsolved problems. And I think there's so much that can be done with that, and it's not an either or, it's a combination of these skills.
So we're going to change fundamentally all of our systems, higher education, the workforce investment
Check.
system, check. And all of these things are incredibly easy to do, and we did it over their lunch. So
And
yay for
we'll
us.
see
And
you-
I
we'll
didn't
see you a year
swear. I
from
don't think
now,
I
and we'll-
swore once.
Nice.
Somebody call my mother. Thank you all very much, and we stayed on time. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you.
All right. Our next panel brings together leaders who are not questioning traditional learning models, they are building what's next. We're bringing onto the stage 3 incredible disruptors representing Masterclass, Speak, and Magic School. I'm particularly excited about this one. My first ever job was at Masterclass, so this is super, super special. We've got Adil Khan, founder and CEO of Magic School AI, Connor Zwick, CEO and founder of Speak, and David Roger, founder and CEO of Masterclass. They'll be joined by Larry Chu, co-chair in global M&A at Goodwin, who has led more than 300 transactions worth over $300 billion. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. Please join me in welcoming them all to the stage.
Wow, it's incredible to be here. This is my first time at ASU+GSV, and I must say I'm incredibly impressed with the collection of people, the thought leaders in the room. They gave us a very controversial panel during lunch, and the topic is burning down traditional learning. Here comes the disruptors. We couldn't have a better collection of disruptors today. I've had the privilege of having an almost 3-decade-long career at the forefront of technology and what's happening, and I can tell you that right now we're living through an age of unprecedented speed and change. And so for a while now, I think people have questioned the veracity of our current educational rails, our current educational architecture. And I'd love to start off with asking the panel what they think in 2026, given what is happening in technology and in AI. What do you think is worth burning down, and what do you think is worth saving? Who wants to kick it off?
I'll kick it off. I think first I'll start with what's worth saving. Before founding Magic School, I was a teacher and a principal, and I founded a public high school. And when I hired teachers and they walked through the door, in our first trainings with those teachers, I said that the foundation of our school is going to be the relationships we keep with our families, the relationships we keep with our kids, and everything else is built on top of it. So certainly we'll have a rigorous curriculum, certainly we'll differentiate instruction for students who are different, who have different learning styles, but the foundation of learning is a great relationship. And that's worth holding on to in a world where we're spending more time on devices. Our apps that we use every day are designed to keep us on them. So human collaboration, human relationship, that is worth saving. In terms of like what's worth blowing up or getting rid of, I think that believing that there is someone who knows better than the classroom teacher on how to educate the kids in front of them. The person who spends the most time in the educational process with the child, to remove their expertise or believe that that relationship and that daily experience with their learning style, what they understand and what they don't, believe that there is an external provider that knows that better than the teacher, that's something that we need to throw away. That's present today. And will likely continue to be even noisier as generative AI comes into the world. I'm a big believer in we need to amplify the abilities of teachers to serve students and use AI as a really powerful tool to assist them and to help augment their ability to serve the diverse learners in their classroom. But there's an alchemy of wisdom and relationship that creates incredible learning that we should hold on to.
So Connor and David, deal you're building within existing rails. Connor and David, you're basically saying there's a better other way. And with Speak, Connor, you've basically shown us there's a way to learn languages outside of the classroom. Do you think the traditional sort of seat-based model is broken and gone? And then David, I'll tee up your question as well. You know, you've brought Hollywood production quality, you know, to masterclass and to learning. Do you believe the traditional lecture is dead? And do you think that traditional learning institutions need to elevate their game?
Yes.
Okay. We'll park the yes for a minute. We'll go to Connor first.
I think David and I are going to agree on a lot of things here. I think to your question around what we see at Speak, so for context, we're trying to build the world's first truly superhuman tutor, starting with language learning. And the traditional way of learning languages, like most things, is really all about, it's centered around number of hours learned. How many hours have you practiced? And that determines how good you are. And then the second thing we have are assessments, which again are kind of famous for testing a set of skills that are completely different than the set of skills that you're trying to learn. And so you get people gaming tests, et cetera. I think this is going to be completely blown up, and we're seeing that with Speak. So we're very focused at Speak on how do we actually build a real measurement of the actual skill that you're trying to master, which is the holy grail of mastery-based learning. And I think the really exciting thing about AI and the technology is that it is possible to do this now. And we're seeing that in the lens of language learning right now, where we can determine in a superhuman way, because AI has a perfect memory of everything you've ever said into the app, exactly what you know and don't know, what you've been able to demonstrate, what you haven't been able to demonstrate, and then we can completely adjust the lessons accordingly. And as a result, we see people get to their outcome, whether that's full fluency, partial fluency, whatever, much faster, at least 3 to 5x faster than traditional methods.
So let me just interject for a minute. How do you reconcile Adil's comment around, you know, the human still needs to be in the loop? There's like a very important aspect of having humans in the loop. And it sounds like you feel like you can do everything without humans.
I think that there are two very different things that are, so far we've combined them as one concept, but they're two concepts. One concept I think is learning, and another concept is classroom. And those are synonymous because they've been intricately linked for the last 100 years. But learning, I think, will be something that you do primarily for most skills with an AI tutor in 5 years from now, because the tutor will be hyper-personalized to you, and it will be, frankly, irresponsible not to have a lot of learning happening one-on-one with a tutor. But I think the classroom is something that we created 100 years ago during the Industrial Revolution to have mass childcare so we could increase the labor pool. And it's kind of linked with learning, but it's actually serving a slightly different purpose. And I think over time it'll be interesting to see how these two things co-evolve. But I suspect that we will dedicate part of the time in the classroom for learning, but there will probably be a lot of time, I would guess, where we'll do the other reasons why we have children in school, which is socialization, connection with the teachers. There's a lot of skills that I don't think AI will be better at teaching. And I suspect that that's the way the world will work. And we'll see that these two concepts are actually a little bit more divorced than we realize.
Awesome. David, you jumped in there, and it was a quick yes. You basically created the category of edutainment. Expand on that a little bit and reflect on how the alternative to traditional learning is challenged by the structure of masterclass.
We know from all the academic work out there that the best way for anybody to learn is one-on-one instruction. So the question has to be asked, why for the past 100 years or 1,000 years do we learn in a classroom of 300 people? Let me ask you, how many of you in undergrad had at least one class that was at least 300 folks in the class? Okay, why? It's simply cost. It simply was too expensive to get you that instructor one-on-one. That is the only reason why. And we paid for that $80,000 a year for 4 years. You can now provide the exact same education for about $100. That's $80,000 a year for 4 years versus $100. if schools, if L&D departments aren't dramatically going to change how they teach, you are dinosaurs. The world is completely going to change. Now, I think in classrooms have done a lot of amazing things, but that is the only reason it exists is because of cost structure, and that now has changed. Now, Adil, to your point, we know also from all the evidence and work that one-on-one instruction and coaching is really powerful. So if you can add in a person who's going to coach you, then that's awesome. But I think the day, if you stay in the model we're in today, you're going to be standing in a lecture hall that is empty.
So how do we get there? That's the question, right? With disruption, sometimes you have gaps. You don't want children who have traditionally only been able to rely on traditional rails of learning to be left behind. Like, how do we elevate everyone's game?
I don't think the technology is quite there yet. I mean, we're trying to build this for language learning, and we're not a superhuman teacher in many ways still. And I don't think the technology is there. So I think that it's a little bit also confusing that can be confused with this idea, oh, well, it's not actually happening. But it is happening. It's just happening in smaller ways right now. And I think over the next few years, it will become dramatically better. And as that happens, I think it will be, as David just said, almost irresponsible if you're an L&D manager or you're a dean at a college to not be thinking about dramatically changing the way that education happens.
Adil, you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I just want to name, like, I'm not a defender of the status quo here. Like, you know, the status quo has not resulted in extraordinary outcomes for kids, period. We need to be thinking differently about how kids are learning in schools, period. My school had great results. Relationships are the foundation of the school. That's my formative experience. It matters. And at the same time, like, we need to reimagine what school looks like and what school is, especially in an environment where technology is changing so dramatically. You know, how we get there, I think, is rethinking what the valuable skills are in the world. I've always thought that, like, leadership's a really important skill. And what is leadership? Leadership is arranging resources in a way to accomplish a really big goal. Usually great leaders start with why. Simon Sinek's great book, right? They help motivate their teams by letting them know, hey, we're building towards something really, really meaningful. I'm helping you see the big picture of what we're doing, our mission that we're working on. Cultivating those things in school by doing things like project-based learning, really, really powerful. Equipping students with those tools for generative AI to manifest something in the real world, builder experience is really, really powerful. But I think I'm really skeptical of the idea that, like, you know, me and a device are going to learn as well as me with a team and someone motivating me and helping me understand the why behind my work and those kinds of things. And I challenge the folks on stage of, like, yeah, hey, you know, your most formative learning experience is the engineers that you work with. They want to know why they're building the thing they're building, don't they? They want to understand that this is going to result in something that's going to make impact in the world. And that's a lot of what a teacher does. They're the leader of the classroom. They help students understand, hey, you're not just doing that math equation to get it done. Great teachers inspire the why behind that work. They make it relevant to their students, and they create a much more rich learning experience than simply acquiring a skill.
I agree with everything you said, except I don't think everybody gets access to Neil. If I had you one-on-one, that'd be amazing. If I had you two-on-one, it was you and two, probably still good. At some ratio, an AI bot that's trained for me is gonna be, if it's one at 100, I don't know what it is. But also, Adil, I had instructors and teachers that were pretty bad. And so I would have spent less money in therapy if I had an AI bot for second grade than if I had my second grade teacher.
I think people are going to need therapy for AI bots as well.
That's probably true. That's probably true.
Adil, I want to double click on one thing. You know, you are deploying within, educational institutions. You're helping teachers save time and friction and really elevating, right, their purpose. What barriers have you encountered in trying to get Magic School deployed in school boards and with teachers?
I mean, there's a lot of fear around generative AI usage, both from teachers and especially in usage with students, right? You can pull up the news and see really scary things that generative AI is doing when it comes to building companionship type relationships with not just children but adults. I'm certain that there are model companies that have stories about those companionship relationships that they don't want the world to know because of how scary they are, that we've seen a glimpse of this in the news. But it's important to remind ourselves that some of the companies behind these models are the same companies that have been extraordinary at addicting us to social media. They understand that, internal metrics at these companies are like time on platform. They're incentivized to make sure you are spending more time on the platform. And that is true with generative AI as well. And those incentives don't belong in schools. So when we win these, we are direct about, with our school districts, if we are here for an educational purpose, generative AI can have an incredible impact on your students for some of the reasons that have already been shared on stage. But we should be really skeptical around bringing consumer technology into school buildings and expecting that's going to be a solution for the challenges that schools face every day. I could keep on going with this debate, but I'm going to let the...
Switching gears for a moment, David, you've spoken a lot about how diploma-based institutions are being disrupted, in particular by AI, and that your focus is on skills-based learning, and how do we increase that methodology of learning and certify people have the right skills that they need?
I have a strong point of view on this, so it is a hot take, so I apologize for anybody that this offends. Let's look at MBA programs. If you aren't in the top 10 MBA program in the country, I'd argue you aren't going to exist in the next 5 to 10 years. Here's why. In all the research that we have done, employers now rank MBAs as below a 12-week AI intensive course. MBAs below that. Now, I paid $200,000 for an MBA, so I got screwed there too. We also see on the candidate side that they don't have 2 years and hundreds of thousands to actually spend on it. If we think about it, I think about my mom and dad who were both attorneys. They went to law school, and every year they took about a day of a class. Sorry to,
More than that, actually.
More than a couple days a year.
Yep.
They went to take a class, and they were still up to speed. Now, all that's impossible. The rate of change is happening so much. If you aren't involved in your field, in 6 months, you're probably way out. You are now a dinosaur. And so with the rate of change happening so fast, I don't think a two-year MBA program works. And so we decided to launch something. It was our first time trying it. So we launched it with the University of Chicago booth and OpenAI. And it is equivalent of a 12-week business program that's taught both in person and with AI. In the first couple weeks, for 500 slots, we've had over 12,000 people apply. And admissions is still going on for another month. We will be tougher to get into than Harvard Business School. I don't know what else the market needs to see that the signal of schools is just dying.
Connor, you also talk a little bit about, skills-based, personalized learning. What's your hot take on this?
What's my what? My hot take?
Yeah, what's your hot take on skills, increasing in terms of the priority stack in learning?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think this is the most important part of mastery-based learning. The entire idea is that around mastery-based learning is like, let's make sure that you've mastered one skill before we go on to the next one. And I think historically, even in a classroom of 30 students, we've had really poor testing or signals to use to understand if people were actually able to achieve the mastery of that skill before moving on to the next one. And I think this is a clear area where an AI should be much, much better. And that's what we see with Speak. And so over the next 5 years, we believe that testing as a concept will feel extremely antiquated. And we will mostly have, I think, replaced that with something better because the value is extremely high. No matter what the test is, if you can have something where you're reliably, as an organization, whether you're a college trying to admit people and you're trying to understand what they know and where they spike, or you're a company and you're trying to understand the skills of your workforce, the thing that we're working on at Speak is how do we actually connect directly and accurately to the skills that you need as an L&D manager, as an example, and being able to very accurately predict whether or not those skills are skills that you actually have. And so we see testing as a concept being something that goes completely extinct in the years to come.
So that's a good segue into moving more towards sort of the future of what disruption looks like. And I'm going to ask a question that we didn't really talk about before, but Adil, you sort of keyed this off earlier. How do your engineering teams, as all three of you are technologists, Adil, you used to be an educator, so you sort of wear both hats. How do your engineering teams work with educators to ensure that you are building towards the future and you're building towards what educators who have decades and decades of experience know that we need, think that that the model needs to move to?
I think that one of the things I agree strongly with that was stated by Connor is this idea of mastery-based learning, and that talk about something that we need to leave in the past is classroom-based teaching that teaches to the middle, right? Being in a classroom where you're way ahead of your peers, you're incredibly bored. If you're way behind, you're not being served. And AI can be an incredible tool in a classroom like that to help students get accelerated if they're ahead of the curve, supported if they're behind. So I get really excited about using generative AI in novel ways to solve some of these decades-long problems of having 30 kids in a room who all are not the same style learners. There are these persistent edge cases for students, and there's only one teacher who can reach them all. So I think there's some agreement here of where AI can play a really, really meaningful part in that story. And then in terms of your question on how we work with educators, we always start with what their problems are. What are the problems that you're facing in your schooling environment? What are the things that we can do to wrap around supports for you? Where would AI fit into the challenges that you're having? For us, as we partner directly with school districts, that is our buyer. We certainly build features that teachers love, but really, the business is built through a conversation with the district who says, this is our strategic plan. Where do you fit into the strategic plan? Because we believe deeply, for our local context, this is our best thinking on what's going to help us drive outcomes for our kids. So it always starts with what are your problems first, and then we come in with, hey, this is where we think generative AI can be really helpful. And we try to push, right? We try to say, hey, you might not be ready for this thing, but we think that it will be such an accelerant to your plan that you should go for it. But at the same time, we respect the local districts that we work with and their vision for what they want for AI for their children. And that is, it currently looks quite different. I'll say that pretty open. We have schools and districts who partner with us and say, we are not ready to use this with students yet. No matter how much you've assured us that it's safe and you've done all this guardrailed work, we want you to turn that off in the platform. We actually give them a toggle to turn that off. And then we have districts who are saying, give us more for students. They want more of the stuff that we're hearing on stage. They want more of self-driven learning, right? So there's a spectrum of the way that schools and districts and communities are thinking about technology. And that's not even going into the headlines around generative AI. If I go to the Northeast and I'm visiting school districts there, they're asking me about climate change and how are you guys dealing with generative AI and its water use. If I go to the Southeast, it's more of a relational question. It's different, but generative AI is more than just a technology. It is it can intersect with your political views. It can intersect with your fears and hopes for the future.
Yeah, I would add, I think for us, we have a team on staff of, it's one of our biggest teams of some of the best language teachers, linguists et cetera, from around the world that help us form our pedagogy. And I think we have also a very intentional thing. You mentioned teachers in classrooms. I think an important note, though, from our strategy is from the very beginning for Speak, we identified language learning as a market to go after first because it was a market where we could go directly after adult learners because the mission of the company is to build the world's first superhuman teacher. So we need to move as fast as possible. And we worry that if we were going into classrooms, we would have to worry about all of these other things and it would encumber us, which I think there's a huge opportunity there. But we're really focused on just proving that AI can be a really effective teacher. And so I think that's been extremely liberating for us because it allows us to really be unconstrained with just trying to build what we think will be the most effective solution and work with learning designers to make that happen.
I think most of the pedagogy that we are taught and taught by is outdated and wrong.
I would agree with that.
I mean, I'll give you an example. How many of you, I'm in this group, were asked at some point in school, are you a visual learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner, auditory learner? How many of you were asked this at some point? There is no evidence that that is true whatsoever, that there's any distinction between any of those things. And if you look at the pedagogy that we are taught with, it's an outdated one, and most of it isn't true. But then most of it was designed for in the classroom. And now that you can learn much faster with an AI, the pedagogy research is going to dramatically change. So I think it's an exciting time, but I think we're starting at almost zero.
So we're just out of time, but I want to do a really quick prediction lightning round, okay? So imagine it's 2030, we're back at ASU+GSV. What should the investors and the educators in this room invest their time or their money in? What's the one thing, and don't just say AI, obviously, but double click real quick. A deal? Connor, David?
Project-based learning, give kids authentic work, things that they can show off in the world, collaborative experiences with others, build human connection.
Awesome.
Ed tech has traditionally been a really bad industry to invest in. I do think education will be one of the biggest ways in which AI disrupts the world. So I think it's an interesting area to invest in going forward.
All right, so the next 5 years to build your own teacher.
Awesome. Thank you to these thought leaders. Thanks for spending time with us during lunch.
Bye. See you soon. All right, we've got an incredible last 2 sessions coming up. I am pleased to introduce Scott Pulsifer, president of Western Governors University. Scott has helped establish WGU as one of the country's most important models for student-centered innovation, using technology and data to expand access, improve completion, and drive real return for graduates. For a conversation on student-first, AI-native vision for the future, please join me in welcoming Scott to the stage.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. I look forward to just sharing with you a notion of what a future can be envisioned that makes it very learner first and really creating an environment that in fact is what they deserve. And actually how AI enables us to think about that or envision that future state without constraints. That's the objective of this. And I'll share with you a model or a method or an approach, if you will, as to how to think about transformation and how we do that. But I'll then provide 7 examples of how we're utilizing that AI to help us redesign, reimagine, rethink about how we can do that in instruction and in learning, in design of programs, curriculum, et cetera, and then leave you with 5 considerations. So, first and foremost, the pattern of transformation is, like many of you have seen these charts before, but there's simply, the reality is that over the course of human history, that there are these catalysts that exist that create a moment or an inflection point where transformation actually does occur and actually splits what actually is going on. That whatever model existed during the first period starts to actually begin its death. It's reached its apex. And you utilize that catalyst to start driving the transformation into the next phase of what the evolution is going to be. And then comes another catalyst and another period of transformation that then brings in a new era. And on it goes. If you actually apply this model of transformation in higher education, you might see this look like this somewhat. And this isn't a perfect example, but certainly you could go back to the Industrial Revolution, you realize that preceding that, but really starting to scale it, you saw the emergence of a modern baccalaureate degree. That modern bachelor's degree moved beyond education, teaching, and theology into actually providing degrees or pathways or programs that were relevant to the opportunities that individuals were going to be pursuing. But then came about this statement of principles, followed not too distantly after that with the GI Bill and the Higher Education Act, that started to actually put in place certain design inputs that brought about the modern university. By that, what I mean is, like, you can think of examples like the Carnegie Unit or the credit hour. You can think of academic freedom or tenure, but you could also think of the federal student aid complex. And during that period, that modern university started to advance. But then came the internet, and institutions like WGU became these first kind of digitally native universities. That internet allowed us to democratize access in a way that we didn't imagine before, that we could reach and teach individuals where they were. Well, what is now AI going to do to that? One of the simple things that we think about is how does that potentially democratize learning and the access and persistence and traversing of that in a way that is much more accessible, completable than it was before. If you also look at the time patterns here, is like one thing you will have noted is that the time starts to compress between these catalysts and the periods of transformation, while the impact scales and compounds differently than how the time compresses. You can even see this in how it existed in higher education. So, let me share with you kind of a notion of how to manage through that period of transformation. Many of you may know that my background was not in higher education. I jokingly somewhat say, is like, I don't know what the board was thinking when they decided to hire me 10 years ago. But I did learn from a wonderfully innovative institution, Amazon, that there's a model that says you have to actually envision a future state. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you have to have a sense as to what, in fact, are you desiring as the outcomes in that envisioned future state. From there, you start working backwards. The first thing you start to understand is what then are the strategic tenets or the design principles and the key metrics or key results that need to exist for you to realize that desired future state. And then from there, you actually go into then the purpose-built products, models, processes, systems, everything else like that. So rather than focusing on where we are, or the tradition or the practices that already exist and building from there, you actually start from the end in mind and work backwards. So you can actually envision your upward slope, rather than staying on your current trajectory, which is a downward slope. Here's a sense of what we imagine this might look like in the future state, powered by AI, learner-centered. That first and foremost, that is at the center of everything you do. Around that, you have to absolutely have in place trust. That trust exists not only with the individual, but also that individual in an ecosystem of talent, or a talent economy, if you will, that exists between the individuals, all of us who are providing the skills into the workforce, and all of those consumers of our talent, employers, the workforce more broadly. There has to be a system by which, in fact, we have digitized that in a way that hasn't existed to this point. But the other thing I don't want to lose sight of is that we are the principals here. The individual is, in fact, the one who has the agency to decide what is it that they want to do for themselves to live a self-directed life. If you start with that core, you start to see certain design principles come about in our envisioned future state. These are some of the ones, not some of the ones, these are the ones that we actually focus on at WGU. You'll note some key phrases in there that are very unique about if you want to be learner-centered, you're actually thinking about how do you personalize, customize, individualize, whatever that verb is, to ensure that every individual has the capacity to access it, to traverse it, to attain it, and ultimately live a self-directed, economically mobile life. Well, to do that, you have to think about the relevance and the timeliness of that pathway to the opportunity. You have to think about that architecture of it from a skills architecture, a competency-based model. You also have to ensure that it's networked in a way that, in fact, gets us from where we are to where we want to be. So this envisioned future state for us actually recognize this is at the center of the talent economy of tomorrow in our sense. that really empowering individuals to be economically mobile in their lives, to do that in a self-directed way. But in turn, you're also powering a workforce of the future, that those employers are also discovering and sourcing and hiring all the talented individuals that they need into those jobs of the future. So let me share with you these 7 examples of how we're doing this at WGU. And this notion here simply to present is like, it's from a university to ... It's not an AI university. It's actually trying to solve for how do individuals acquire the knowledge, skill, and ability they need to progress on the pathway to the opportunity they want in the future. That may or may not be in the construct of a university. So, first example, you have to think about redesigning programs and pathways. If a program is a credential or something that in fact exemplifies the knowledge, skill, and ability that I have that's relevant to an opportunity, those programs can in fact be not just the first one, but a second one. But the pathways have to recognize that all of, in this case, 9 different starting points, that all the modes and methods and costs and time, et cetera, and duration and routes of how they get from where they are to where you want to be are different. There's no standardized model by which we're doing that. We're following a personalized roadmap to that. And it's not one time, it's another time, and it's another time, and it's another time. So keep this kind of GPS orientation in your mind as you think about this. Second example. How does AI actually help us enable cognitive task analysis starting from the opportunity and the role and the job at the end, and identifying actually what are the skills then required to actually be successful in that role? Designing then the kind of competencies required, the assessments, et cetera, and you start to realize you get towards more micro courses rather than large-scale Duplo block-like courses. You start to think about varied and hybrid delivery, meaning all can occur in a classroom on a campus, or in our case, even in a one-on-one digitized interaction between you and between you as a student and instructor. And you move from this kind of fixed path model and academically, start from the provider side into a future, and you actually start from the market side and drive that into the customization of those paths, the programs, and the curriculum. The next step you can see is how I'm going deeper into this. Is how we're utilizing AI. You heard some great examples from the panel before this, is that personalizing learning and adapting the journey means that in the specific subject matter that you're trying to develop proficiency and competency in right now, the instruction has to occur in a way that is right for you, not in the standardized delivery of content model that most of us have known. But that adaptive journey also means that it has to be sequential for me personally. The depth of it has to be relevant to me personally. That if both of us are in the same physics class, we may never even traverse the same content because it's composite in its nature for us individually and specifically. That also means you start to realize that you're going to get to this variable assessment model rather than singular summative assessments. Because if there is no standard Duplo block course, then the assessments themselves are no longer standard final exams. Next example. Many of you in the room have probably known Benjamin Bloom's study over 4 decades ago at Northwestern Chicago, who highlighted this simple point. That in a conventional instructional model where we have the single faculty member broadcasting all this content to a classroom of 30 to 300 individuals, that's a content delivery model. In that model, 20 to 40% of individuals develop mastery, and it's a wide distribution. As you have mastery with corrective instruction, you in fact improve the proficiency and the percentage of those who achieve it. But what he really realizes when you combine that corrective instruction with one-on-one tutoring, you in fact see that the median proficiency of that group of individuals is 2 standard deviations better than those in a conventional instructional model. But more importantly, more than 90% of individuals can develop mastery in any subject. That's the design approach we're taking to WGU. Now, many of you already know this, is that we designed an instructional model that is already one-on-one. It's like 24/7 office hours between students and faculty. But what does AI do for us now? You can so dramatically scale up that tutoring one-to-one model in a way that we, even at WGU, have never contemplated before. Because why? So many of those instructional interactions are actually enabled by an AI instructor bot who's utilizing that custom composite content and curriculum that's relevant and timely to where you as an individual are in your journey to develop mastery in that specific thing. So for the first time, we actually have the opportunity to combine both Bloom and Kettinger in 2023 et al. That highlighted that pretty much there's an astonishing regularity in the pace of learning, that we need 7 attempts to, in fact, develop mastery in any given thing. Well, how do you do that then for the vast, diverse population of individuals that we need to enable? Going deeper, you just move from episodic testing to now to continuous mastery. How do you do that? Because now you're actually assessing proficiency as you're moving along this personalized content. This leverages that cognitive task analysis that I talked about earlier, but then it structures it into this domain models to ensure that the mastery is developing continuously rather than only measured at one high-stake endpoint. What we're finding at WGU is it dramatically increases the attempt rates of individuals for the exams in the first place. And the first attempt pass rates have gone up notably, like 10+ percentage point increases in the pass rates. But what you also recognize is that it's actually continual. What does this help us do? You start utilizing this AI-enabled continual assessment model into work-based non-academic journeys too, which are in fact much more about demonstrating learning at tasks, activities, engagement, etc. Now, what the other cool thing is about AI is getting really good at observing even and inferring what are the proficient outcomes that you're actually expecting as you observe different models of learning. That even helps design what those assessments are going to be like. Lastly, let me share 2 final things on this in terms of 7 examples. So coming back to this core trust and agency problem, you have to actually have a means and mechanisms by which you have a trusted verification of an individual's mastery, proficiency, competency, whatever you want to call it, and the credentials that they've attained as a result of demonstrating that competency. That means that you have to have a digital transcript model that is highly interoperable, not across only institutions where you acquire the skills, but with the employers who are actually seeking those skills into those jobs. Of all the supply chains that exist in our economy, the least digitized of it is the talent supply chain. And AI is now enabling, that is in fact a screen of the digital learning and employment record that we offer all of our students. We have nearly 120,000 individuals now on it. We are trying to get all 1 million of those that we've served in our journey to be on that, and it's actually surfacing that for them. What are all the roles and opportunities for me, given the skill profile that I currently have, as well as for all the jobs that I aspire to? What are the skill gaps that I need to address? And then how do I actually recognize the custom and personal pathways that I can acquire those skills to be ready for that job? Lastly, AI helps us redefine access. You even heard it up here in terms of like all those individuals. We're talking about hundreds of millions of individuals in the US alone. They're trying to figure out how to actually change my life for the better, and they know that learning and acquiring skills is the single biggest catalyst for that to occur. But when we get the opportunity to redefine access and convert that skill into opportunity, a unit of one individual, our lens goes from this kind of view to say, hey, there's 20 million people enrolled, to all of a sudden, everyone in the workforce is now someone that needs to be served. Why? Because this is actually about what my next opportunity is, and the job that I'm in is going to be disrupted by AI. And now, what skills and skills and capabilities do I need to acquire for the next opportunity? It allows us to now think completely differently about access and enrollment, because now you start to figure out ways like I can mass customize at scale learning journeys that serve every individual from where they are to where they want to be. That, to me, is amazing, because we'll start talking about enrollment in education totally differently in the future. So, for all of you in the room, for all of you leading institutions, for all of you on the workforce side of that who's trying to figure out how to upskill and reskill all of your individuals, what will you choose to transform? How are you going to utilize AI to remove the constraints and the parameters that you previously lived under to think in an unconstrained way that's focused on the individual, that you can create de novo, that allows you to abandon the past to kind of settle the future? What are you going to choose to do? So let me offer, in closing, 5 considerations in this regard. First and foremost, AI actually should accelerate the pace of innovation while lowering the risk of it. How do you do that? Because in fact now with digital twin technology enabled by AI, meaning it observes all of our students across their entire journey, that you can effectively make a synthetic student for every single individual that you've actually observed. That you can model and test, prototype, and pilot things utilizing these digital twins, synthetic students, at a rapid pace that you did not deal with before, that you had no availability to do before, but more importantly, you're reducing the risk. Because now you can actually prove in effectively a randomized controlled trial with synthetic students that which you had to enroll thousands of individuals to start to measure whether or not what you designed was going to work. You get incredible predictive power. Second consideration, and this is certainly true from WGU's standpoint, please take a holistic, integrated approach. Most of us who went to conventional degree programs at more conventional institutions, we traverse 40 different courses with 40 different instructors, and no one is paying attention at all to how I experienced across those different courses, and we are hardly utilizing technology in those specific classrooms in those 40 different courses. Think holistically across the individual's journey from that GPS kind of mindset, from where they are to where they need to be. How do you utilize a data-driven decision intelligence architecture to drive that? Third consideration, this is a pro-human approach to applying artificial intelligence. We are the principals here. However, you have to be willing to prove it. We even take that mentality with respect to the 1,000+ mentors we have serving the nearly 200,000 currently enrolled students. That we have to be able to prove that the human approach to things is better than the AI native approach to something, and vice versa. Fourth consideration, please keep in mind that, again, we are the principals here. Think about credential portability. If your employer's on the workforce side and you're thinking about how to reskill and upskill things, do not assume that they are going to be with you for decades. So how do they take all that knowledge, skill, and ability they acquired through the learning and training they developed on the job or through other academic models, and it travels with them? They are the sovereigns. Lastly, are we entering into a post-institution future? This idea that, in fact, institutionally provided one-and-done education, coming-of-age experience, it's actually freeing us up now to think about structuring learning that is proximal to the individual and the opportunity. It is at the intersection of where they are and the next opportunity. For that means there are so many 25-plus-year-old individuals who now we can serve in a way that thinks differently about an institution of learning and instruction. Let me just close with the philosophy. Tale of two Zenos. The first Zeno is of Aleia. Many of you know him, 5th century Greek philosopher. He basically put a lot of these paradoxes in front of us. The most notable one was Achilles and the tortoise. It was captured by my professor or my teacher, Mr. Allison, in calculus in high school. You can leave my class at any time, but you can only go half the distance with every move. You can never get out. Transformation ends up unattainable, so you don't bother. You just give up. You're just trying to polish the rock that I already have. But Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism, 3rd century BC, his argument is like you start with small achievable steps. And with each step, you learn so much that you actually lengthen the stride in the next step such that action matters more than precision. Transformation is actually realized through action. I wish you all the best in your transformation. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
All right, I'm sure you're all very excited to welcome to the stage the one, the only, the legend, producer, director, author, Goldie Hawn, joined by Deborah Quazzo and Dean Carol Basile.
Okay. I can't tell you how excited I am to be on stage with both of these women who I admire so deeply, but I do have to start by thanking Goldie because you made my parents cool. And the way you made my parents cool is like, I grew up in, I'm 65, and so in late 60s, early 70s,
every week, the one thing you could set your clock to was watching Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. And I thought the fact that my parents had us all watch Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, you're all too young for this, but anyway, made them so cool. It was remarkable. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You made
You are very welcome.
You made mom and dad cool, which is not always easy to do with moms and dads, so it's good. Goldie Hawn is really quite a marvel. She is an Oscar winner, Hollywood icon. She's a lead actress in over 25 films, TV shows. She's a great mom. She's a great grandmother, a great partner. And in 2003, because people say, like, why Goldie Hawn? I'm like, okay, let me tell you why Goldie Hawn. So 2003, you started the Goldie Hawn Foundation, which you built and what has built up to become Mind Up. And we'll get into that with Carol as well. Your initiative for schools reaching over 7 million students today in 45 countries. I'd love you to talk about what brought you to that decision really early. When you did that, not a lot of people were thinking about mental health for kids and things like that. So really, what drove you there? What caught your attention about what was happening with kids? Was it your own kids? Whatever. So we would just love to hear the Goldie Hawn story about how you got here.
Okay, well, first of all, I can't bear an unhappy child. It's very, very, very interesting for me because it really upsets me. Children should be happy. They should have a good life. They should have an enjoyable childhood. But what I was learning and what I was seeing, which was really alarming, is that I saw that children were actually committing suicide at 10 years old. And when I started looking at some of these stats, I thought, wait a minute. I was doing a documentary on happiness, believe it or not, because I felt in search of joy. It was important to experience this feeling. But then I realized that our children were not experiencing it either. So I took everything I was studying on my documentary, and I created a thing called Mind Up, because what I learned is that kids were never learning anything about their brain. And we're asking them to use it. And understanding their brain gives them some agency to their own emotions. So they're able to understand part of this. Why are we not teaching the brain and pieces of the brain to understand a little bit more about their emotion, about their ability to self-regulate, when we ask them to learn? Because they go together. Learning and also understanding ourselves. Like Plato said, learn about yourself and then learn about other things. The reality here is that I couldn't understand it. I'm not an educator. Obviously, I came from other areas, right? I had my own learning disability. I am, dyslexic, although I'm happy as a clam being that. But the reality is that there are so many things that didn't make any sense to me. So I pulled together a group of scientists, a group of neuroscientists, positive psychology, scientists, and so forth, and I put together this program. And I put it together like I produced a movie. I had an idea. Why not do it? I didn't have any thinking about should I, shouldn't I? Because I don't argue. Why do we ask children to learn about anything without teaching them what they learn with? So after I put this together, I researched it, and it was unbelievable. But here's the research. I could make myself happier. I worked better with children. I had better experience with math and English. We did, I don't know, for 10 years we did research on this. I didn't do it. I didn't pay for it. But we had it done. And even in Portugal, where they did research the same, came out the same. Our children were healthier, they were happier, which actually made me cry when I found out that we could create solutions. And we're here today. And today is a very exciting time, and I'm really happy to be here, might I say. And it's wonderful to see everyone confabbing together. When 7,500 people are not doing it together, which could really be a mosh pit like we've never seen in our life, but just together is great. Well, we want our classrooms to have community. What's happening today is our children are not well. We all know that. So today I'd like to interject that the people that we want to learn and teach and inspire and excite are children that are frenzied, children that are not always present, children that have anxiety. We have some really serious issues. So there's two things here. We have to focus in on the mental health of our children, because otherwise you'll have nothing to teach and no one to learn, because they can't. So if a child doesn't feel strong in themselves, understand their brain, know how to understand their reactivity, to be able to self-manage their reactivity, to learn empathy, because empathy can be taught. Kindness can be taught. And we have these areas of being human where we're building greater human capital. So can we build human capital? Brilliant, smart minds that know how to actually strategize, understand, be happy, bring up children that are happy. How can we do that and continue to move in the area that we're moving? We're very excited about AI. I am too. I'm doing AI and Mind Up because it's the way to go. But our children and our people in the world sometimes are not ready to learn because they're too upset. They have issues around a frenzied brain, cannot learn. So we need to do both at the same time. And there's no reason why we can't integrate. I've been doing it for 23 years, integrating it into the academia, introducing it into, and also including our parents. So we can do a holistic way of focusing in on our children, on the future of America and the world, and be able to actually learn as well. So this is why I did this program. And I think it's no time like the present to be able to understanding that learning is no different than being brain fit. So brain fitness also goes along with learning. We can create all kinds of systems, but are they excited enough about learning to use them? And will they get lost in the very thing that we're creating today?
I love that you called it inner curriculum somewhere. I love that phrase. That was terrific. Let me go to Carol for a minute, just because one of the things I love about Carol and about ASU broadly is that marginal solutions are not on y'all's agenda or radar. When you do things, you want to be doing it for impact and for scale and to affect more people and more students and more children. So I'd just love to hear, I think you all are in the process of setting up a full-on partnership, and I'd love to hear, what was attractive about this, what was interesting about ASU partnering with Mind Up and the program, and how the two of you see scale driving from you. You have scale already, but there's more to be had. So, and to your point, we need every child to have this. So, love to hear your perspective on where do we go from here?
So I'm sitting here as a dean of a very large teacher preparation program, College of Education, and I have always felt, a number of years ago, that the only way you could come and you could learn from us was to come and take classes or to get a degree. And in fact, I always felt that made no sense, that everybody today should be an educator in some way, shape, or form. So the question became, how do we liberate our content? How do we give that content in all kinds of ways, right, to start thinking about what does it look like if we can give every parent, every tutor, every grandparent, every community member ways in which they can also work with kids. Everybody should have this information, and they should get it from a valid source. So a number of years ago, we created something called our Community Educator Learning Hub. It now has 200 nano courses, but the problem is it's static. So then comes Goldie, and we said, all right, so what's not there, right, is all the things that Mind Up has. Because as she's, articulating well, these two things have to go together. If we say there's a struggling reader, not only do we have to address the fact that we've got somebody who needs to learn better the skills of reading, we also have to deal with the word struggling. Or if we say there's a kid who's excited about, my granddaughter's really into crested geckos, so crested geckos, let me just use that, then we've got to figure out not only how do we teach her, right, how do we do this around science and how do we get her more interested, but we also have to deal with the excited part. And how do we continue to do that, and how does she use her brain, right? And how do we as educators help kids to do this? So the idea is to take the content that we have, what we know about teaching and learning, blend that with what Mind Up has around thinking about preventative mental health, thinking about the brain, thinking about things like brain breaks, and bringing these two things together, planting all of that into AI, right, in a way that we provide together the valid content that people can use. And then, as I always say, how do we make it a public utility? How do we make this something that everybody can then have access to say, I've got a kid who, and actually get the kinds of answers both on the instructional side and on supporting the mental health side and the human part of this.
And so it'll be distributed through the public school system. basically.
I think it could be distributed in a lot of ways.
Okay.
That's the beauty of AI.
Yep.
You know, we can distribute it in many ways that we couldn't before. One of the reasons why I went and thought to myself 2 years ago, I had teachers, trainers, you know, all over the United States and Europe and so forth. It was such heavy lifting, and you weren't able to really get the kind of training that was basically synchronized to exactly what should have been done, because obviously they're humans training. And you keep a look. I said, okay, I don't want to be a training organization. I want to be an innovative organization, continuing to create new ways and things for children and teachers and parents and so forth. So I thought, I'd just do this in AI. This was, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years ago. So now we are building different, interesting ways of training. It isn't necessarily always your regular kind of training, but it's animation, it's ways to do it. And we're excited because then we can give it to many people. It's accessible to many more people. And when we've got something like this, we want as many teachers, parents, people to be able to understand the very thing that we're all trying to do, right? Is to, whether you're going to teach math or STEM or whatever you're doing, it's much more facile to be able to get it out in the world. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, either one of you give maybe the audience a more tactile example of, I mean, how does Mind Up work today? So is it nudges? Is it suggestions? Is it, what kind, and I appreciate it's parents, teachers. How does it operate today, and how does it, impact teachers and children? And how do you, obviously you're already out there on AI, so how do you see it moving forward in terms of a sort of a product roadmap thing would be really interesting.
Because of need. There is necessity out there. And I think that's one of the areas that it's not arguable at this point. Solutions are everything. We can hold up the dirty glass about what's going on, but we need to find solutions.
Yeah, we can't, a lot of what happens today, right, is we say, well, we think professional learning is a silver bullet, right? Everybody says, oh, we just need more professional learning and teachers. Well, we don't. Because it's not working, it hasn't worked, we've put trillions of dollars into it, and it's not getting us anywhere, and people are turning over too fast. So we've got to find other ways, and this isn't just about teachers. As I say, this is like, I want this to be like, you turn on water, the water comes. Like everybody, right, should have access to this. Everybody should have this as a public utility that says, look, I've got a kid who, whatever that is, right, and you can do something about it in time. You don't have to go, oh, I got to go talk to my kid's teacher. Oh, my teacher said my kid has X, Y, Z. Oh, whatever that is, but I don't know how to help, right? This was COVID, like everybody, kids weren't in school and parents didn't know what to do. They didn't know the tips around how do you help a kid decode, how do you help a kid do this, they don't know. And so we've got to give this to people. And people have to get it in a way that is not only just the content part of it, the instructional part of it, they also have to get the human being part of it, the brain part of it. And they have to know how to do that, and they have to know how to talk to a kid, and they have to know how to recognize what's happening when it's happening. And they need it just in time. They need to turn on the tap, and it needs to be there. And it needs to come from a valid source. And so I think that's the beauty of what we're trying to create. And yes, we want this to, we want to give this to educators. We want every teacher to have this as well. But it's got to be bigger than that. It has to be more than that. And I think that's where we're trying to see that, what we can actually do here. What are the stories that we can begin to tell that help people to see how these things start to come together, because we've always done them very separately. Socio-emotional learning's over here, the instruction's over here. These two things have to come together.
I think the differentiation that I felt around Mind Up was I didn't know what social emotional learning was. I had no idea. I was in Vancouver. I was up there because my son was playing hockey. I went to visit, did a lot of conferences about brain and meditation and things like that, understanding how basically incredibly powerful it was on brain fitness. But this is the area where I looked at and I thought, oh my God, this is unbelievable. We have to be able to do this. So that's pretty much where I took this with the fearlessness of going out there to teach brain in the classroom. But it wasn't social emotional learning. It was brain science. Because the brain science is the one, a very funny story, one of the kids in Colorado, Basalt School, got into trouble. That whole school was a mind-up school. So the teacher took him into the principal. She said, okay, what happened? He said, well, my prefrontal cortex, my amygdala wasn't thinking, and my prefrontal cortex was overactive. I mean, it was like hilarious, right? So, but we think that kids don't like their brain or they don't understand it. They love it. I mean, they're telling me when they're in first grade where their amygdala is and whatever. And this is what you want. I mean, one little girl said she was pulled off the curb, and her aunt said, she said, do you know what saved our lives? And the aunt said she thought she did because she pulled her off the curb. She said, no, your amygdala. And you know, when you start changing the vocabulary of how you speak and how you think, then the mothers and the fathers come in and go, oh my God, I need this program. What's a brain break? I need one. And the kids take it 3 times a day. And they understand that they even come in sometimes and say, I think I need a brain break, and they're 8 years old. If they do need a brain break, we all need a brain break. And that's one of the reasons why it's important to, as fast as we're going, is to slow down. It's got to happen. And then we can think better, we can feel better. And just remember when children say they could make myself happier, that one did me in. We all have to get happier. And we have to find our ways in order to actually jump over some of the hurdles that we go through and enjoy our lives for a period of time, one little bit every day. And that's what we help our children understand. So all this dialogue and languaging is brought into the problem, brought into math. You know what one of our teachers did? Took math, the times tables for mindful movement, because everybody has to move. Kids can't sit there like this. So jumping jacks, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 8. This is a classroom that was engaged and having fun. So we have to keep our children inspired. Now, these are our children, but you know what? I'm still a child. I have to be inspired. I need all of those things. So we're not just children, but we do know that our children are going to grow up. And God, please, let us be smart enough to know that we have to stay very involved in their mental health. And this kind of holistic look at how we build these systems, why isn't mental health brought into every single conversation? How would I do this? What's the best way to go about it? Why do I feel anxious? How can I move myself into a different area? This is called metacognition. Do we have metacognition? Do kids know what that is? We can watch ourselves. I can watch myself do that. And they have to learn to watch themselves too. So we have so much to share with them, and it's so beautiful, and they have to know how amazing their brain is. And potential is something we'll never know, but we have to be able to give them the opportunity to serve their potential, whatever it might be. And I think that this kind of partnership that we can create on this, and I think it's a brilliant idea, is engaging our learning and our creativity and all the things we dream about and bringing into it brain fitness, brain knowledge, and how we're able to manage our emotions that hijack all of our thinking. So that's not all I have to say, but I'm going to stop.
Love that. It is, you are remarkable. And one of the things I deeply love about this is, Lord knows you did not need to create another legacy. You have the greatest legacy in history. I was listening to somebody, young actors do an interview the other day, and be like, who is your inspiration? Goldie Hawn. And I was like, that is awesome. And so you did not, I mean, you did this out of your own heart. You can hear that on the stage. It is incredible. I think the fact that you two came together is a gift, and that you're sharing it with us today is just, I cannot express more gratitude. Is there anything else as we sort of finish up the conversation, as you think about this legacy and what it could look like in partnership with Arizona State? Anything else you want to leave with the group, or you care out, either one of you or both, in terms of what you hope 50 years from now, when we're probably all gone, is this looks like?
You know, it's one step in front of the other. It always has been. You can't build anything without putting one step in front of the other. We're doing that now. And the whole idea is that we don't give up. It's the give up of itches in the world that can't sit at our table. You actually can't give up. And you have to dream big. The only thing is that you can't be unrealistic. And the other thing that I would say is that remember that we can always talk about what's wrong. But one thing we have to remember is that we have to find solutions to what's wrong. It isn't just complaining. It's looking at how do we look at this strategically and say, how can I build a healthier world? And right now we're starting here. But to build a healthy world is to start this way. So it isn't like it can never be done. People said, you'll never teach children about the brain. You'll never have 3 brain break meditation in the classroom. You'll never do that. And I thought about it, and I said, let me research this first. And I researched, and it was so extraordinary, the shifts and changes in our children. I said, watch me. I didn't know what I was doing, except that I cared about kids, and I took it down all over Canada, came down to America, and went full bore. Then I went at 150,000 children, whatever, in UK, Portugal. Next thing I know, it's like popping up in all these places. And we're in China, in 13 provinces. I don't have any marketing, none. And the only thing that I had was a beautiful program, and I didn't want my name to be ahead of it. I tried to name my, thing different, like the, gold, whatever light foundation. No, it ended up being mine, but I wanted mine up to be the star. So what we have to do is plan ahead, a dream, but know how to actually make it happen. So solutions are everything. And I think that's my parting.
Thank you.
And I think you have a brainchild here. I think it's going to happen. And I'd like to see it happen in our lifetime.
I think we're going to know more about learning than we have ever known before. I think behind the scenes, right, all the data, all the things, that we are going to know more about how people learn, more about how kids learn, more about how they're feeling, more. We're going to have to address this. We cannot continue to just separate these things and think it's just going to happen on its own. So we're excited. We're very excited.
All right, well, I'm excited. So thank you both so much. Lisa, thank you, thank you.
So good. All right, everybody. Well, that concludes our midday StageX, but we are not done yet. We've got some exciting announcements and celebrations kicking off at 4:30. So stick around and enjoy your afternoon. See you all soon. Thank you so much.